week's show and tell. We've got Jevin and Sam from Tanner Goods here. Let's welcome them. Cool. Just two really quick announcements this week. One is the London info session is happening right after this in this room. So if you want to learn about maybe spending the summer in London with some other graphic design students from the program for a few weeks and doing some workshops and stuff like that, stick around afterwards. And then come back next week at the same time. We'll have Andy McMillan here, who is like kind of the king of the internet. So if you like the internet, you should come to that. Any exciting news from anybody? Any announcements? Anything to share? No? Okay, cool. You guys ready?
Yes, sure.
Let's get to it. All right. Tanner Goods is a group of designers and craftspeople as well as skilled laborers. They strive to create modern products that respect the past. Their philosophy combines a design-minded approach with a deep commitment to crafting items by hand. They choose carefully from the materials they use and the suppliers they select to the people they hire and partners they join. This thoughtful approach extends to everything they do and make. They try to think before they act. They go to great lengths not to over-design their products. They carefully consider an item's intended use, and they focus on how that can be best served without adding more to it than necessary. And I have to say that I wear this belt every day for 2 years, and I would say it's all true. So thanks, guys. You're welcome.
All right, thanks. All right, thank you. How's everyone doing today? Muy bueno. Sorry we didn't have quite enough coasters, but everybody set up close. They got them. Anyways, my name is Jevin Lautz. I am the sales director at Tanner Goods, and Sam Huff is the creative director. And being that you guys are, I assume, mainly a room full of designers, Sam is going to be leading most of this discussion. We're also going to throw you guys a little curveball as well. And typically you guys kind of have it where we talk to you guys for a half hour or so, and Q&A after. Today we're going to do kind of a more interactive, and I want you guys to stop us anytime, ask questions. We're going to be asking questions of you guys, and we're going to have videos we'll be showing as well. So keep that in mind, and yeah, that's all I have.
Cool. All right, so thanks for coming out, guys. Just a quick poll. How many people know about Tanner Goods or have heard of it before? Ooh, so pretty good amount. So what we thought we'd do today is, instead of just telling you about everything we do and the products we make, sort of make it an interactive thing where, you know, it's more about sort of the why we do things and our approach. And like Jevin said, pose some of these questions to you guys, and maybe if anything, it'll inspire us to all sort of think about why we design the things that we do or how we approach those designs, and yeah, just kind of keep it sort of conversational. So I guess when it comes to the products that we make, just to give you guys some background, so I studied industrial design in college, and then I moved to Portland right after college and worked for a small design consultancy called Fuse. And it was 2 ex-Nike guys, and it was really small. We did a lot of sort of conceptual projects. So a lot of stuff, you know, we had like, Japan would come to us, this big conglomerate, and say, here's a piece of technology, figure out what we can do with it, give us 200 ideas. So we'd do that, send it off, and then that was it. Like, we'd never see how it got turned into a product. And so right out of college for me, I realized that like I really like design, but I felt like one half of the process was missing. So I worked there for a couple years, or maybe it was like a year and a half, and it was really small, and this is when the economy was sort of turbulent, so they would lay us off when there wasn't work and hire us back on. And I think the experience of going through that, along with this feeling of like, okay, I was designing something on paper or doing it digitally and then sending it off into the ether, and then I never saw what came of it, or the product that came back was totally different. That sort of left me a little bit disillusioned. And around this time, Jevin and I, just so you guys know, Jevin and I sort of grew up together in a small town in Central Oregon called Sisters. And so we had always talked about doing something together, and we had started this like streetwear brand, I guess, a graphic tee company, and that sort of turned into what we're doing now. But for us, it was always about like wanting to have our own business, and we're both very entrepreneurial, but finding, I guess, a niche where we could execute our vision. And for us, it came down to sort of controlling the process and feeling fulfilled. So it was, for me, it was, I want to design something, and I also want to actually make that thing and hold it in my hands and put it out into the world. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
For me, the big, I guess, kind of fulfillment with creating, your own brand, working for yourself was my background. My background was more in the sales marketing side. I worked in the snowboard industry for about 15 years, and for Burton, and actually started a outerwear company as well. But really, the main thing for me to find that fulfillment was creating a brand that was not so dependent on weather, first of all, and it wasn't something that was seasonal. And that was really kind of the, one of the biggest, I think, hurdles for us at first, but it's also something that we saw nobody else was really doing, was creating a brand of consumer goods, especially in this realm, that wasn't, seasonal. And so with that, we created something that was year-round. It's not something that, you put on sale. It's not something you have to, it goes out of fashion immediately. So really, I guess that lack of fast fashion almost was important to us, and that was really an important part of kind of the inception of Tanner Goods, is that it's kind of the opposite of that. It's something that is, has longevity to it.
So I guess the first question we want to pose to you guys is, what is your process? And I can just tell you really briefly sort of what our process is, because again, it comes down to asking the question of why we make this product, like why and how we make the product. And I think when it comes to design, whether you're a graphic designer or product designer or whatever, 75% of being a good designer is asking the right questions. Because at the end of the day, we're all problem solvers, right? Like, artists are out there expressing themselves and creating something that is uniquely them. We are solving a problem for a bunch of people. So, if someone comes in for a job interview and they show us an illustration or they show us a product they designed, one of the first things I ask them is, okay, why did you do this? And often I get the answer of, I did, or it's cool. And that's okay. Like, there's room in the world for stylists. You can go out to Nike and they have a million silhouettes that you can change colors on and resketch. But I think what sets apart a good designer from an average designer is being able to ask those important questions. Why am I going to design this? What's the intended use? All that sort of stuff. So a lot of what we'll get into sort of comes back to that question of why we're doing this. What's the meaning behind it? And from a brand perspective, I think that's what consumers really gravitate towards. Like, people are savvy. They can tell the difference between a brand that's doing something because it's cool versus a brand that's doing something because they believe in it or it ties into a bigger ethos. So if we start sort of from that point, one of the big things for us, again, was controlling the process start to finish. So designing it, creating it, and that sort of is one of the things that sets us apart from other people making stuff in the US. We do everything in-house. So we'll sketch it out, we'll sample it, we'll test it, we'll manufacture it in-house. We do all the marketing in-house, so we'll shoot all the collateral, we'll present it to the world. And then ultimately, we love for people to come to the store and actually buy it in store, so that they can sort of experience the whole thing start to finish. So a lot of what we'll get into is sort of that start to finish process. But this is just a good example of, okay, here's a sketch of the bag that we're going to make. And it's, tweaked itself over a few years, but we sort of start with this idea of, okay, if we're going to make something, the big thing for us is longevity. So let's make something that will stay in our collection for years to come. Because like Jevin said, we're not trying to produce new things each season and be a flavor of the month. We're going to take a lot longer time to nail the details and produce something that aesthetically, construction-wise, will be something that somebody will have utility over, X number of years. So part of this sort of ties into this question of quality and value and longevity. This is a book that was assigned to me in high school. I made it halfway through and it was a little too dense, but randomly when I was a freshman in college, they assigned it to my design class. So I went through and read it again. And I think a lot of the seeds for sort of our thinking about design stems back to this book. So if you guys haven't read it, it's a great read. But I wanted to read a quote from this real quick that sort of sums up our approach. So in the passage, they ask, what's new? What's new is an interesting question and broadening, what's new is an interesting and broadening eternal question, but one which, if pursued exclusively, results only in endless parade of trivia and fashion, the silt of tomorrow. I would like instead to be concerned with the question of what is best, a question which cuts deeply rather than broadly, a question whose answers tend to move the silt downstream. So in essence, that's what we're trying to do. Create something that's best, not create something that is now. So this is just sort of a broad sweeping overview of all the products that we make. Again, we're not necessarily replacing stuff each season, but what we are doing is broadening our scope. So when we first started, a lot of retailers asked us like, well, why are you making a belt that's going to last somebody years and years? How are you going to sell another belt? And our approach was, well, because ultimately we want to make quality product, and it's not about turning that stuff over. It's not this idea of planned obsolescence. But if that person buys a belt and they love it and they form this relationship with it, maybe that inspires them to go broader and to buy another product. So that's sort of our approach with product development and sort of the categories that we get into.
Okay, here's a good time to stop you. Okay, question for you guys out there. For one person, what does quality mean to you? Who wants to answer?
I'd say it's taking into account like what you're really going to be using it for, and finding out what those uses are and how long your product will last, and not buying something that's just like immediate need, and taking into consideration like how long that is really going to work out for you.
Great point. Yeah.
So follow-up would be, how does that apply to something outside of what we're doing? So say you guys are designing a graphic or whatever. What if you were given an assignment and it's, are you a graphic designer or are you from another discipline?
Graphic designer, printmaker.
Printmaker, okay. So say a book company came to you and said, hey, we want you to design a cover for Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. What would your approach be to solving that problem?
I guess I would really want to take into consideration like how long people are going to have this book and like what they're going to be reading it for. Those types of situations. Is it something you keep in your pocket all the time? Is it something that's going to go on your bookshelf? And then like really kind of figuring out where you could break that up. Like would you have a paperback cover or like a leatherback cover or something like that? So,
yeah, cool. And so that's ultimately like those are the questions we need to ask ourselves as designers before we tackle a project.
Can you repeat that?
What is the answer?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying, I would take into consideration like materials and like usage, like why would you want to have a book that's like paperback if you're going to be using it every single day, like out on a trail or something? So you might want to have like a leather bound, just kind of material usage and like what it's really intended for.
Cool. So that's sort of an overview of our approach to product creation. When it comes to the manufacturing process, we use this term under one roof with some of our marketing collateral, and that sort of just ties into this idea that like, look, we're doing it all in-house. There are other Made in USA brands that, maybe it's like 2 or 3 people in an office and they're designing something and they send it to a factory in, say, Fort Worth, Texas. And for us, quality is paramount, and so part of that is controlling it start to finish and see the product come off the line and making sure that it's in line with what we want to be making. So just because something is made in the USA, I think there's a lot of value that's put on that term. I don't think that means shit. Like, it totally depends on where you're making and who's making it, what the conditions in the factory are, because I've been to other factories here in the States that make stuff, and it's a sweatshop. Like, it's no different than what's happening over in Asia or South America or wherever some of these other factories are. So I think that's a good place to start is, for us, is telling the story of, yeah, we manufacture in the States, but we do it differently than a lot of other people. We do it in-house. And these are just a few examples of sort of our process, but it's kind of a mix between sort of these old school techniques and modern technology. So when we were small, you know, like we used these hand tools because we couldn't afford anything bigger. But as we grew, our operation grew and certain things have been automated, but for us, since quality is paramount, it's sort of a balance between efficiency and being very hands-on with the product. So yeah, that's kind of a quick glimpse into our process. I think another important thing early on, at least for us, is having a mentor. So a mentor can be many things. You know, a mentor could be a teacher, a mentor could be somebody within your industry that sort of is a sounding board that you can throw questions at, or maybe it's somebody that gives you insight that you wouldn't otherwise normally have. So for us, it was this guy, LP Strifel. And when we were first starting out, we'd go down to Oregon Leather, we'd buy leather from them, and you know, we didn't know much about working with leather, especially on the sewing side. So one of the clerks down there, he's like, oh yeah, you should get in contact with this guy, LP. He's a saddle maker. He's like kind of old and crusty, but he's a total character. You'll love this guy. So LP was the guy who basically sewed all our stuff in the very beginning and was really the guy that was teaching us all these techniques. And it was great because he was at the end of his career, so I think he wanted to pass along this knowledge. And for us, it was just, man, it was great just sort of seeing how it was done in the past and how we could take some of those processes and apply it to what we do, but not necessarily verbatim, because we're not reproducing, you know, this heritage item. We're just taking the best of from the past and then applying it to what we do now. But yeah, we'll play the video because I think a lot of his life is explained in these videos, but look at that first.
When I was in the service, every weekend of the month, we had a kind of a jackpot where we went out and rode bulls, and they were pretty rank little bulls. Evidently, I had won the bull riding for the year there in Hawaii. That's the thing in the past now. The reason why I fell in the saddle making is a few broken ribs, broken wrist, broken leg, and my face, which put me in the hospital for a few weeks. Time to settle down. When you're a bull rider, that's what happens. You're going to get hurt. Yeah. To develop a good trade, you have to work at it and practice to make it perfect. When I was doing the apprenticeship, you did it in stages. And he'd show you how to do one thing, and then you did that until you perfected it, then you brought something else with you. The more you do, the better you get. I was originally born in Fort Totten, North Dakota on the reservation, but I was born there in 1937, December 6th. Most of my life I went to Indian boarding school, so when I got out of high school, I went in the Navy, served on a LST, and then I went to the submarines. After that, I kind of settled into Missoula, Montana, and I did a lot of amateur rodeos and stuff there. Dropped both the bareback and the bronc riding and just went to bull riding. And kept putting in applications for the cogshell saddlery, and I was always a day late, was always short. And finally, I was at a Castlemar and running a new stable in North Dakota, and I got a call if I wanted to go to work, be there the 1st of September, and that started my trade as a saddle maker.
So yeah, basically his bronc rider got injured, he became a saddle maker, and he's been doing it ever since. He lives up in Vancouver, Washington. But really important part of our process, and we wouldn't have gotten as far as we have now without him, because he basically helped us launch the brand. So yeah, very instrumental in our brand development. And maybe a good question for these guys would be, you know, like does anybody have an example of a mentor or someone in your lives that has given you an opportunity or helped sort of evolve your approach or whatever? Maybe if anyone does, they want to share that with the crowd. We've got a prize. So nobody said that. Oh, right there.
So my high school art teacher basically pushed me like no one's ever pushed me before. And I didn't really like her for that for like the first couple of years. But after that, I realized that she was trying to instill good qualities in me and good practice. And she's one of my favorite people on the planet now. So.
That's a great example. You win a prize.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, that a lot of times these people, they do push us, and it may be uncomfortable in the moment, but you know, you look back at it years later and you're like, wow, okay, if I hadn't have had that push or that whatever, it wouldn't have brought me to the next step. So that's great. Thanks for sharing. Jeb, do you have a mentor?
You. Up to you.
Yeah.
A black artist that's also my mural instructor. Asaka Samson. He's a mentor. And I also I modeled for him, as well as I drew. I took classes, few classes with him, drawing and painting. And he pushed me to I had desired to become an art model in the first place. And he pushed me to work as an art model in the schools, even for the art models guild. I'm proud of that now.
So he gave you an opportunity you didn't otherwise have,
Yes.
and that brought you to the next stage in your life. That's great. So that sort of brings us to sort of like the all-encompassing like ethos statement, if you will. So our tagline is worth holding on to, and that sort of just ties back into this idea of, hey, let's all analyze like what are the most important things in our lives. And while leather goods certainly isn't saving the world or anything, what we're trying to do is just encourage people to ask like, what is important to you, and how does that influence how you live your lives, the time you spend with people, the things that you're curious about, or your education, those daily experiences in everyday life. How does that one central question, you know, what's most important to you, how does that play a role in how we live our lives? And so, yeah, from a literal sense, you know, you could say worth holding on to. Well, okay, we make products that, you know, have value or worth, and they last a long time. So like in a very literal sense, they're worth holding on to. But you dig a little deeper, we want consumers to ask that question of themselves. And I think a lot of the marketing material and stories that we tell hopefully inspire people to ask that question of themselves, how to live their lives. So maybe one last question for you guys is, you know, if you were to take that statement, worth holding on to, what are the things that are worth holding on to most in your life, or what's most important in your life? Yes.
I think for me, like a lot of it is like the community that you're a part of, and like having relationships. Like I think that what's worth holding on to a lot of times isn't something that's like physical, and it's something that like it's in your head, or it's how you interact with people, and like just making sure that you have this positive qualities and like the mentors and all this kind of positive aspects in life.
Exactly. So community, family, friends, you know, these are parts of our lives that, I mean, I would put that above everything else personally, you know. Who are those people that are most important to you in your lives? Because they affect your lives in so many ways. Let's give that man a prize.
Can I take a comment,
Yeah.
actually?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think it's interesting what you're doing, because I'm very fascinated by it. Also, I do like old school woodworking kind of stuff that people don't do anymore. but there's a movement.
I'm gonna jump in really quick. People can't hear what
I can
anyone's
use the
saying, so
microphone.
we could get the microphone going.
I can use the
Let's do that. How long is that good?
But it's funny because I was talking to my wife about this, and there's this huge movement in Portland to save old Portland homes. And so, because they're being demolished and rebuilt with inferior products, basically. But somebody wrote an article into the Oregonian, which I think was very good. And he said, people nowadays are not being trained to produce work like this anymore with an apprenticeship and pass down knowledge and real skills, to create something that is of lasting quality and kind of related to what you guys are doing. And I think it's fascinating, and I love looking at the past for people could do so much back in the day with hand tools.
Yeah.
And basically did all the work with hand tools before power tools, but kind of reminds me of what you guys are doing. I thought that was an interesting tie-in with the housing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. I think if you want to look at the next slide, I mean, that's exactly what LP was to us. From a selfish perspective, we wanted to learn about this trade, and from his perspective, it was something that maybe he wouldn't get to pass on, he didn't have an apprentice. So he wanted to be able to continue that knowledge. So yeah, whether it's knowledge or a trade or a skill, that's definitely something that we feel is worth holding on to. Relationships, like we talked about, so Jevin and myself, you can see that picture on the top right. So the third guy that sort of runs the company with us is Scott, and we all grew up together and sisters. And I think, we've been longtime friends, and we understand where each other is coming from. And I think even a lot of the ethos of the company probably stems from this little community that we grew up in. So relationships are important. From a very literal sense, products, even the van that we have, we'd much rather have an old van that's still, it totally works for what we need it to, instead of just buying a new vehicle. And it's a great piece of design, and it's cool. It's the bikes that we ride. I have a few bikes that my father-in-law's handed down that were hand built in the US, and products that have a lifespan of 20 or 30 years, why do we need to keep creating stuff when we did something once that was great? We don't need to just always go for the new or the flash. There's a lot of great stuff that's been made over the years. And I think Portland's good about that. We understand this idea of we don't need to keep consuming stuff. I think even the food that we eat, the products that we use every day, it's what are those interactions where if you have a belt, for example, if you have something that you use every day, why not have something that's, I'm not saying our belts are the best, but have something that is of great qualities. Because it's these little interactions every day. I hate using those little big pens, because to me it's just God, this thing is has a lifespan of a month or something, and it's going to end up in a landfill somewhere. That stuff drives me crazy. So yeah, worth holding on to. I think applies to so many different areas in all of our lives. I think it's a good place for us just to start as designers and ask ourselves, why am I making this? Am I making it for a reason? Is it going to be around, or am I just making it to it's just this one flash in the pan sort of thing, flavor of the month? Yeah.
Come on up. Price is right.
My question is, would you say that your practice and the kind of the business model that you've adopted of really long-term goods is fueled by environmentalism and sustainability?
Yeah. Great question, first of all. There is some definitely importance in there as far as sustainability. Environmental part, we can't claim that we are, low impact, zero footprint, because hides, are a byproduct of, our consumption. But with that, we're not able to use 100% of every hide. We do, best we can, which most times means 90%. But the sustainability part, big part of us wanting to manufacture, locally and do it ourselves, was a big part of that. You're not shipping stuff across the seas, you're not having the fuel consumption. And then also, one part we didn't really touch on a lot of our materials that we do use are sourced domestically as well, and even down to our hardware and rivets, which are made locally here by machinists. So we try to do our part there where we can, and not have to buy stuff, from far off places, in order to, I guess, keep our carbon footprint to a minimum.
Excellent point, Chip.
Okay, Jordan.
And before, if you do the next slide. So I just want to preface this by saying, I don't know if you guys know Jordan Huffnagel or know of his cycles. He's made bikes in town for a few years. He has another project called West America. He and his buddy built these motorcycles and rode down to the Patagonia. He's a character, and he's been in Portland for a long time, but he's funny because he has a very similar view on this temporary culture. But I think a lot of it comes down to we live in this digital world where, where even on Instagram, you're just I want to see more, and we're always consuming. And I think sort of this movement to the tangible, the analog, part of that's a response just because so much of our life is just this temporary thing. So it's a balance, and I'm not saying technology sucks. I use technology, I think it's great, but I think it's a balance that all of us have to strike. So we'll let Jordan break it down for us.
Everybody had jobs like this in the 50s and 60s, friends, fathers who worked the same job their whole lives, and now it's where everyone's getting these internet jobs or, these corporate jobs that pay really well, and they can live these fabulous lives on the weekends. We get to kind of have fun and make what we're attracted to making.
These jobs are getting so few and far between in our country now because of the outsourcing of everything, that what's left behind is going to be extremely valuable skills that people are going to be paid well for, because you can't outsource your car mechanic. You can't outsource a plumber. You can't be I'm gonna get this guy in India to fix my plumbing today. No, it's the dude down the street that's gonna come by and fix your stuff, and you can't replace him.
I feel the way you learn is you get some really big jobs that are over your head, and you fake it like it's easy, and you do that all the time, and then you stress out for 6 weeks building it, and then you get ripped off in the long run because they don't pay you the last deposit. And that's kind of how you learn how to run your own business. It's the failures that really do teach you the most. I mean, sure, the successes are awesome. You smile and you glow all the way home, and then you forget about that one, but you always remember that one that really bit you in the ass.
The internet will give you all the information that you need to be able to make it look like you know how to do something. Every day, there are so many people out there faking it and charging the money that the top people are charging, and they have been doing it for 2 weeks, or they just made their first one off the internet instructions, and now they're and I'm gonna sell this for $5,000, and you're how do you get off, man? You haven't earned that price point yet. You don't even know if that one's gonna stand up. You don't know if that thing's gonna be around in 3 weeks. It makes buying things so much harder nowadays because you have to really do your homework on who you're having make something for you, because you have no idea if they're actually excellent craftsperson or if they are some Yahoo that just learned how to do it on the internet and thought it was cool.
So I think he brings up a good point at the end that the internet is sort of this mask, and as designers or creators or whatever businesses, you can put something out there and you can totally fool the consumer that what you're doing, or you Photoshop the hell out of something so if somebody zooms in on the product, they can't see all the blemishes or whatever. But I think the true test is okay, is that person around in a year? I've seen a lot of Kickstarter projects that launch and they make all this money, and then 2 years later it's they're out of business because people actually got the shit that they bought on Kickstarter and they're oh, this piece of shit. And then they told their friends, and then nobody bought the stuff. So again, it comes back to whatever we're making, it's quality. The proof is in the pudding. You can put it out there, and you can sell somebody that it wants. But if there's nothing to back it up, you're going to be gone in a year or two. So it's a good consideration for all of us in whatever we're doing. Like, are we putting the absolute best thing that we can out into the world? This sort of ties in with our Worth Holding Onto campaign, where we encourage customers to sort of document the process of breaking in their stuff, having it for years and years, sending us pictures, we'll put it on display. And for us, it's a great way to not only show that, like, yeah, the aesthetic, the construction, the materials means it's going to be around for a long time, but it also sort of builds this bond between us and the consumer where it's a conversation now. It's like they form this relationship with this product. Everybody wants a totally unique thing. Like, we all want unique experiences in our lives, right? And so when it comes to a product that they break in and it is one of a kind, I think that's one of the best things that we can provide a consumer with. Like, hey, have this for a year, 2 years, 3 years. No other product, even the same thing, is going to look identical to yours. And so we give them a platform to share it with other people, and they're stoked because they get to share their unique little perspective or their thing. And then other people see it like, wow, okay, well, I want mine, to look like, our lifestyles are vastly different from me to the next person. So it's great to see, one wallet that's been worn by one guy for 6 months next to one from another person, and they're totally different because it's just a representation of like their lifestyle or what they do. So these are just like a little smattering of some of the products. If there's anything you want to say too, grab the mic. So tying into this whole under one roof concept, we probably employ a lot more people than your average leather goods company in the States because, again, we're producing it all in-house. We have our own retail stores. So it's not only great just from sort of a local economy perspective, but I think we're in a unique position here in Portland that for what we want to do, there is a really, really deep talent pool of people who have the same ethos, but also enjoy making things by hand. So this isn't everyone, because some people live down in LA that work in our retail store, but it's a good selection of some of the people that we employ. Come from all walks of life, all parts of the country, but the thing that we all share is sort of this appreciation for quality goods, handcrafted goods. And I would say, it's a lot of it comes down to you guys. Again, like, this is a really unique community, and you guys are one of the reasons that it is what it is. So we get asked all the time, like, oh, why do you guys choose Portland? It's like, well, one, it's our home, but I really couldn't imagine us doing what we're doing in any other city. So that's everybody. So again, this whole like start to finish under one roof thing, this is just another example of like, look, here's a sketch. Here's us testing it out. Here's the finished product. And then on the next slide, it shows some images of our retail stores. If you guys haven't been in there. I would say if you haven't been in the one in Portland, go on Sundays. Our guy Colton in there plays records all day long. He's got a great selection. So if you follow us on Instagram, he always posts. He does like different genres too, like do psych rock on Sunday and funk on Sunday. So you can go in and rap with them and hang out. They're all super nice people. Sort of an extension of this under one roof thing is just keeping things close to home. And Jevin sort of touched on this, but working with suppliers or vendors here in town to keep money in the local economy, but also, if we can't produce it in-house, we're going to find somebody that's close so that we can ensure that the quality is top-notch. So we have all the little rivets and button studs that we use on our hardware. We switched over from snaps a few years ago because you can't get snaps in the States. You have to get them from Asia. And we had a few that failed, probably a higher failure rate than we wanted. So we took a look at it and said, well, shit, let's just change the way that we fasten our things and use press fit rivets that are manufactured here. So we work with a local machinist that machines all these little pieces for us. We got our start buying leather from Oregon Leather, and they've been a leather distributor here in town for, 100 years or so. We have all of our books, some of the ones that you guys got today. Those are all made here in Portland, so it's a very Portland thing, like DIY, keep it close to home, but we believe in it, so. And then Another sort of consideration is just like the people we work with outside of the vendors, like what are the brands that we want to align ourselves with? And a lot of it just comes down to a shared ethos. So, you know, it seemed like the Ace Hotel collection, we saw the Cielo bike, our guy Taylor that works for us, he also has a company called Make. So they make candles and soap and stuff here in town. Danner's been in town for a long time, you know, Snow Peak, House Industries, just rattling them off. So yeah, it's the partners that we choose, it's not just about like, oh, like, remember when collaborations were like the biggest fucking thing in like the mid 2000s? I don't know if you guys like, especially if you follow apparel and all that stuff, it was like, everybody was just so like, fuck, let's throw 2 logos on this thing, and it's like super limited, and it's like, what does that mean? Like, who gives a shit? So for us, you know, first we start with like, okay, who has the same idea about goods and manufacturing and all that? Okay, cool, that checks that box. Do they make cool shit? Okay, let's make some cool shit together. And then some of it just comes down to like, look, there someone like Danner, you know, for the most part, up until like recently when they launched this new collection, like their main person is like the hunter, outdoorsy hiker person, or maybe even like the ex-military dude that wore Danner's when he was overseas. And for us, it's also sort of a strategic thing that's like, look, these people have a whole demographic that maybe doesn't know about us, but they make great stuff. And maybe our demographic isn't somebody that knows necessarily about them. So it's also an opportunity for us to kind of like speak to a new market and say like, hey, you know, here's who we are, here's what we make. And hopefully everyone wins. So, and then we have just a couple videos. This first one, I'm totally gonna put you on blast, Jake. Jake is here with us, he's our graphic designer. And we decided to shoot more content ourselves this year. So this is just a little video that we did for the Danner booth that we launched this year. But that's him on a motorcycle, getting wicked.
We're told from an early age to make good decisions. Play nice with others, drop the speed limit. What's the fun in simply following the rules others make? No, we decided to take a different tack. We're firm believers in try everything twice. Once to test the waters, and a second time to really enjoy it. Because all of life is worth taking in. And when you find those fleeting moments that are irreplaceable, you hold on to them and hold tight. Now, people try to convince you they know the secret, that they figured it out, and you should follow their lead. But the truth is, there's no magic bullet or one-size-fits-all guide to life. It's not as easy just splitting into opposing camps. Work and play, success and failures, wrong and right, it's all one and the same. It's a choose your own adventure, and we're moving forward in all directions. So, let's continue to run headlong towards the unknown. Enjoy both the sour and the sweet. Seeking adventure. It feels good to take a leap of faith every once in a while. Because seriously, what's the worst that could happen?
There was just rocks at the bottom of that. They were joking, that's like the, you know, the end credits, and then it pops up and just like, I like playing. But so the next video we're gonna watch, while it's not like a direct collaboration on a product, another thing that we're interested in doing is pulling in our outside interests and finding ways of supporting those communities or those interests, because at the end of the day, like our world doesn't just exist within that workshop. Like we're not just interested in making leather goods, we're interested in food and music and all kinds of other products and outdoor stuff and whatever. So we recently teamed up with the festival Picadome, which you guys have probably heard about. There's an artist that was there last year, Foxygen, that we're big fans of. And there's a music blog that we read called Aquarium Drunkard. And so we all got together and said, like, you know, what can we do that's cool? So we went to the festival last year. They're basically launching these exclusive videos of the performances leading up to this year's Picathon. But we recorded 2 of the songs that Foxygen performed, and we're going to press them to a 45 and give them out in both of our stores, probably 10 or 12 weeks. And just give them away. And like, you know, if you're at the festival and you can make it to get one of these during the day, like how awesome is that? You're at the show, you get a little live recording on vinyl of the performance, and we get to spend money on something that we think is cool and not just like putting an ad in a magazine or whatever. So this is one of the performances.
Should I take This is the hive. I haven't been down there since
If you look closely, Jevin's playing tambourine off to the side.
It keeps going.
So we wanted to leave you guys with one last video that's sort of a look inside of our workshop, and there's no talking or anything, but the idea was there's a lot of really interesting equipment in there, and so the video is called Sounds Within, and it sort of focuses on just like the sounds of the workshop, because if you go in and there's no music playing, it almost sounds like this, I don't want to call it symphony, but it's just all these different instruments almost that are playing over the top of one another that create this like sort of buzz and hum in the workshop, and it's really cool. So last video is Sounds Within. All right, so that's about it. Thanks for coming out, guys. questions? Yep.
Come on up.
Step to the mic.
My question is, what does the struggle, or if there's a push and pull between quality as in longevity versus style? Like, you guys design some really cool looking things, and things that I see that are like, I see a lot with people copying or people doing a lot, and I just wonder what that kind of looks like as far as like hitting the drawing board versus like what it looks like actually in use, and how can we test that?
Yeah. Cool, great question. So I would say we start by not really trying to assign a style or an aesthetic. I mean, I guess like you can say it's a clean aesthetic or whatever, but what I'm more interested in is like the patterning and in a thoughtful way of putting this stuff together. So we have, for example, we have this wallet, the Tradesman wallet. It's like a pretty complex, big wallet. And it's not, you look at it and it's, I think a lot of people think like, oh man, their stuff is like pretty simple and straightforward. But for us, it's about like how do we bring all these different elements together and how is it patterned? It's almost like a little piece of origami. And so I think it's cool when you look at that piece and you're like, wow, this was constructed or designed in a really thoughtful way, as opposed to this thing has like a bunch of pockets that I'm not going to use, or or it looks like very techie. Or I think if someone can assign a style to that, like, oh, this looks techie or this looks sporty, that's not what we're trying to achieve. So if that happens, then I'm like, fuck, okay, we've kind of failed there. But if anything, we're just trying to strip away all that stuff and just approach it from like a really thoughtful way of construction and patterning.
What is your demographic?
So yes, what is our demographic? We get asked that question a lot, and I think people always want to create this like vision of like, oh, you serve this one person or this one person, but really like you walk into our store and see the people that come in there and buy stuff, and it's all over the board. I think a lot of people sort of assume that we cater more towards men just because we're guys and it's mostly men that buy our stuff, but you'd be surprised like how many females buy it. And back to your question, again, like we try and design stuff that isn't necessarily gender specific. There are a few styles that are more gender specific, but we also approach it from this idea of like, I want female or male to be able to pick this up and feel like, yeah, this like totally works for them. So I would say demographics are all over the board. We have teenagers, we have like old dudes all the time coming in buying stuff, male, female.
Nailed it. Actually, a little story pertaining to that. We were flying somewhere maybe a couple of months ago, and getting on the plane. I have my duffel bag, loading that up, and sit down. This older dude, probably in his 70s or so, stops me like, "Hey, what duffel bag is that?" I was like, "Oh, it's just brand Tanner Goods, here in town, make everything." He's like, "I know it." Pulls up his shirt. He's wearing a belt. He's like, stuff like that. Like, that's cool. Like it does truly transcend and kind of all demographics, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, the cool part's like he didn't see the brand Tanner Goods. It was just like, I'm attracted to that, and it just so happens probably the same reason he's attracted to the belt. So, what else you guys got? Yeah.
Going back to your upstarts a little bit and being inspired by like a lot of us, especially in Portland, are inspired by like romantic ways of looking back at the past, whether it's aesthetics or craftsmanship or the way they used to do things. And we have this kind of romantic notion of looking at the curmudgeon guy. Now it's like a romantic view of what he did then, but that was probably a day job. And then what I'm curious to is like, in your experience, going from something like being inspired by the legacy of that, something that used to be just a day job, now just are looking back at it in a romantic way. How have you, or what is the process for dealing with reconciling romantic notions, romantic views, or romantic charm of the way things used to be done, and wanting to create something contemporary and authentic now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something I'm really interested in because I think there's two camps. I think back in the day, the person that, like take LP, for example, all the equipment that he has is still like super old school because that's what he's invested in and that's what he has. Whether it's that or, you know, a woodworker using only like hand tools. The reason that they did it that way was because that was their only option, right? So that's what they had to do. Now we sort of have an opportunity to either say, cool, I like that process and I want to do it the same way, or I can take a more modern approach. So maybe it's like, there's three camps. There's like super old school, then there's new school that's gonna like do everything on a CNC machine and like super teched out. We're trying to strike a balance somewhere in the middle where it's like, yeah, we'll use these older machines because there isn't a better alternative currently, but we're also not gonna limit ourselves and say like, well, there's 3 people making everything by hand in a garage and like every product touches this one master craftsman's hands. Because that's just not like, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make, I'm gonna totally fuck up this quote, but it was like this Eames quote that's make the best product for the most people for the least amount of money. And so, you know, we've been very thoughtful with scaling our operation. And, you know, if it does come down to like, okay, we need to make more belts, let's figure out how to automate that process. Let's not sacrifice quality, but we're trying to like serve as many people as possible because we're not saying like, we're not elitist and saying like, oh man, I'm gonna charge so much money because we only make 100 of these and I only want like, I want it to be this thing that everyone wants, but it sells out. Like that's not our approach. So we're trying to sort of strike a balance between the two. Yeah.
I'm struck by how the language you use is exactly the same as Musama. And I'm just kind of wondering, I mean, I think it's cool actually that companies like yours are finding a foothold in Portland, but I'm wondering, you know, do you guys ever get together?
Yeah, because Mazama's my company too, or my wife runs it, so we're involved with them. Right.
Yeah, okay.
We just swapped out Tanner Goods from Mazama. No, and I think like, so like the Mazama thing, I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but again, it's sort of just like handmade drinkware, but our approach is the same. Like, you know, it's this item like a coffee cup that you use every day. Why not have one that's, you know, a really nice cup? Because that's an experience, you know, like people love their cup of coffee in the morning. Why would you drink a really great cup of coffee out of like a shitty cup that you're gonna throw away? So it's basically, to answer your question, it's taking like all the same principles for what we do with leather goods and bags and just applying it to a different product group or different category. So.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
So much.
Thanks for having us.